This is TrueNorthTV, powered by Communitech. From Waterloo region, Ontario, Canada, to the world. The conversations you need and want to hear with interesting people who live at the intersection of technology and humanity. Tech for good. Let's get started.
Thank you, Talia. And hello and welcome to another episode of True North TV. I'm Ian Klugman. My guest today is someone I've known for close to a decade through my role as the CEO of Communitech here in Waterloo region. His name is Hongwei Liu, and he's the CEO of Waterloo-based MappedIn, whose indoor mapping technology is in use in more than 500 million square feet of space in buildings around the world. Hongwei was born in China, grew up in Ottawa, and came to Waterloo to study electrical engineering, and that's where he started MappedIn. And I met him around that time at the Communitech Hub, where we were one of his first customers. Now, with shopping malls, commercial buildings, and other major clients in many countries around the world, MappedIn has since grown to a 65-person operation under Hongwei's leadership. Welcome, Hongwei. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
So, Hongwei, global pandemic is a crazy time to run a company in any regard, but especially one which sells product into indoor spaces. We're going to come back to that in a second and talk a bit about that. But first, tell me a bit about MappedIn. Tell me a bit about the company. Tell me about the technology.
Sure. So MappedIn is Canada's largest indoor mapping company. Last year we powered over 140 million searches, helping people find stuff around the world in mostly shopping centers, but airports, sports stadiums. We're the largest in our category for shopping centers around the world, which was fantastic. And still this year, I would say they're terrific customers to have, but it's a hard year for them and for us.
It's crazy the amount of square feet for your installed base. Now, tell me a bit about how the model has evolved. When you were thinking about MappedIn initially, how much has the model and the product evolved from that point in time to now?
So a key insight that we had early on, but we didn't necessarily share too much outside of our customer base, was that it's less about the user experience. That's what everyone sees, right? It's those directories in the malls, and 140 million people used them last year. It's a big number. But actually more of our focus is on tools to maintain indoor maps. And it's a problem that you wouldn't think about until you work with these landlords and you realize they just scribble on pieces of paper all day long when it comes to updating where you sit, for example. And so for the longest time, we've just been investing in mapping tools for your office manager, for the marketing coordinator at Conestoga Mall, and that's our core product. So if we want to call that a pivot, fair enough, but that happened actually pretty quietly a couple of years ago. But I mean, from day one, that is the only part of the code base I have ever contributed to. Thank goodness. I'm not very good at coding anymore, but that was my original contribution, was building the map editor. It's always what I wanted to do.
And fast forward, of course, to March 2020.
Yeah.
Where were you, and what was on your mind? And
Yeah, March 2020. I was getting ready for my birthday on the 15th. I was living the best sales quarter MappedIn has ever had. We closed more business in the first 10 weeks of this year than in any 10 weeks of MappedIn's history.
Awesome.
And then March 9th, we started going home. I said, hey guys, this is weird. Something's happening. Let's take a day on Friday. I think it was March 9th, and let's just try working from home, just in case. Take some stuff home, make sure you have a home office. Never came back. And that was a long 6 months ago. And we've grown a little bit since, but this year's it's a weird year for our industry, and we're supporting them as best we can.
So you've got a very interesting vantage point from which to look at this pandemic. Of course, you were born in China.
I was.
You still have family in China. You lived in Ottawa.
Yep.
And of course, you live here. What is it that you're seeing that's different about what is happening than other people might be seeing, or that's being reported in the media, or if anything?
Yeah. We could go pretty deep on that one. I'll focus specifically on COVID, I guess. Our business has lots of exposure to Asia as well. In fact, the only part of our business that's growing right now is in the Asia Pacific region. So I was just on a call late last night with Australia. We signed up new shopping center chains and real estate property chains in Australia, in Japan, Thailand, and the Philippines. We will never have a customer in China. I'm convinced of that. It's It's just not happening. They buy local, and that's okay. But in terms of the COVID response, I think it just hit them sooner. It hit Asia sooner. I think some reacted better than others. The Australian government I was talking to last night, they are on complete lockdown because they have, I think it was 200 cases a day in the state of Victoria. And their lockdown is no joke. Curfews, if you have a house party and they catch you, they issue a massive fine on the spot, stuff that we wouldn't think about doing. And that's Australia, right? So I think that I think Canada's doing a pretty terrific job, all things considered. I'm glad to live here. I think we should learn from Asia, not necessarily China and how they do things, but Asia as a whole, and how they're responding to this pandemic. And it's been interesting to observe that for sure.
So Hongwei, fast forward to today. Tell me a bit about how Mappedin is pivoted to respond to not just internal mapping, but helping keep people safe.
So the public safety initiative has been something that actually we kicked off and announced back here at Communitech with Pizza at the Prez, with the Prez a couple years ago. It's been, call it my side project until this year, where it's becoming more of a major focus. Our goal at Mappedin has always been one map everywhere, one model of the indoors, a digital copy for every physical building, and using our tools. The data belongs to the building, to you, to the city, but it needs to be maintained digitally. And we realized a couple of years ago, mostly by accident, that actually the single largest beneficiary of having that outcome, of having a digital copy of every building in the city of Kitchener, is for public safety. It's for the fire department when they show up at the hospital or the school. It's for the police. It's for EMS. It's for the permitting office so that they don't have to work on paper. It's a big problem. And how we first heard about it was, I grew up in Ottawa, as you said. I went to Lisgar Collegiate, which is the public school downtown. And a couple years ago, when we had those terrible shootings downtown on Parliament Hill, Stephen Harper's daughter, when he was still in office, was going to that school.
Wow.
And so the RCMP shows up at the school. Hey, we don't know what's going on. We got to get Miss Harper out of here. Where is she? And the school principal office says, well, it says she's in history. Let me go find out where that is. They didn't know, right? And so my math teacher, Mr. Tang, tracked me down, shout out to him, and said, hey man, I heard you got this mapping thing going on. I have this mapping problem, right? We've been sitting on this for a while, but we should probably know where stuff is, where classes are assigned, and this is a problem. And never mind that, but every time a plumber shows up for our radiators that keep breaking, a teacher's got to take time off to go meet that plumber and guide him or her to the right classroom. This is a wayfinding problem and a safety problem. And that's when I started doing the research. I've gone on over a dozen ride-alongs since. It's the funnest part of my job with fire chiefs all over Ontario. And you realize just the scale of it. Because when the fire department gets a call outdoors, they're pretty good, right? They're GIS systems, they use Google Maps, they have proprietary systems. They find their way to your house in 3.5 minutes in the city, which is phenomenal from that first call. But once they show up, the incident commander says, okay guys, this building looks like it was built 50 years ago. So I'm guessing there's an entrance in the back and an entrance in the front, and it's probably made out of wood. Let's get in there. That's it, right? And people die. And in the US, the Columbine School District chief of police hired by the school district was interviewed by the Washington Post a couple years ago, 5 years ago, 2014. And he was quoted as saying, I still drive around with maps of all of my schools and a shotgun and a bulletproof vest in the back of my cruiser. Paper maps of every single school, because in case he's got to go in, he's got to know the layout.
Well, and things change, as
things
you say.
Exactly. So this is a huge problem, and we just, thanks to Mr. Tang, we started double-clicking on it, and I'm still learning more every day.
It does have such a huge impact from a public safety perspective, as you know. And we're in a building we have about 100,000 square feet here, and we do have the fire department through on a regular basis. But it's all anecdotal knowledge as to where things are.
Yeah.
So no, this just sounds like a huge opportunity. The other thing I wanted to talk to you a bit about is some of the contact tracing work that you've been doing as well. Yet again, I think another example of the smart entrepreneur sees a challenge and an opportunity arising from a situation and says, we need to do something about this. So talk a bit about that.
Sure. So, I mean, once again, it was inbound. So I guess I'm not as smart as I'm just good at reacting to stuff. In March, late March, we had a call from a hospital in Philadelphia. I can't say which one. And they were referred to us by a Fortune 5 company that we work with a lot. And they said, hey, that company says you guys might be able to do indoor positioning and mapping for us. We have a problem. There's this thing called contact tracing, and I have a problem statement, which is I need to know of my hospital staff, doctors and nurses and so on, who has been within a self-reported COVID positive person within 5 meters for 5 minutes in the last 5 days, right? So those parameters can change, but like that general statement. And we looked at the problem. First of all, I had no intention of what I call chasing the ambulance when this whole thing hit. It was about focus on our customers. Like we didn't have a COVID solution. Nobody did. But when they told us what their problem was, we said, well, we're halfway there, right? Because there's two hard things here. One is indoor positioning and mapping. We've done that anyway. And we've been grinding away at that problem for 9 years for our real estate customers and watched them spend fortunes on hardware that doesn't work so that we basically learned what does work, right? So we know how to do this, and it's hard. And the other part is the actual tracing, right? So how do you have a server that can log, ideally anonymously, all the people where they were? And that's a hard problem because, if you had 1,000 devices phoning to that server every second over 4 weeks, that's 1 billion data points. It gets big. And the privacy concerns and all that. So we assembled a very small task force. We put them in a virtual room, and they worked on it straight for 8 weeks just to crank out a solution, which solves that problem statement. How can we anonymously, but with user IDs, allow the hospital to do contact tracing last 5 days within 5 meters for 5 minutes? And we've open sourced the entire thing. So I don't want MappedIn to be in this business. I don't want the world to need this in 2 years, right?
But it does right now. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about MappedIn's solution to this is that it's not just proximity. It's the fact you've got
it's location.
Highly location. Yeah. You've got these highly accurate maps of indoor of spaces. So people might be close to each other, but there might be a piece of plexiglass between each other.
Exactly. And that's a big part of my job, my day job and this COVID job is just explaining to people how indoor positioning works, right? My only other job in life was working at Research in Motion, BlackBerry as they call it now, on RF engineering. So literally the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth circuits. And a lot of folks are confused about proximity versus location, right? Proximity means my phone can hear your phone's Bluetooth, and therefore we're in COVID contact according to the COVID Alert app, which we both have on. That's great. I'm glad that we have that. It works for the picnic area. It works for, the McDonald's that we both happen to walk into. But if we use it for an airport, for a workplace, and one person says they're COVID positive, half the workplace is going to light up. Half the stadium is going to light up, right? And the reason why there's so much confusion around, well, surely that doesn't happen because these beacon people have been telling me for years that their range is only 10 meters, right? And so Bluetooth only goes 10 meters, right? Well, it's like, Bluetooth is photons, right? Like electromagnetism, it's literally a photon, and there's no physics that we know of that makes a photon stop traveling after 10 meters, right? It depends on the humidity. It depends on literally quantum mechanics of if it hits a water molecule and gets absorbed, but it's not actually that accurate. You can't actually know how far people were, and you can't do the time during which they were there. So I don't think from what the hospital told us, that wouldn't be a practical way to get nurses and doctors back to work and give them the confidence that they actually weren't in contact. Because every day you'd be sending half the crew home. So we realized this is something that needed to exist. I'm still doing a lot of educating, I would say. And I wish a recording worked, but people seem to just want to hear it from the kid that worked at BlackBerry. So I'm doing that a lot. And hopefully it helps. Hopefully it gets the world back to work, and that's actually good for our original business.
Yeah,
That's what I want to do.
No, it's fantastic. Now I'm just going to shift gears a bit. From the very beginning, and I would say, of course, over the last 9-10 years, a lot has changed as far as the way that we think about data and privacy.
Sure.
Of course, with what happens with Cambridge Analytica and with Facebook, it has become an issue of our time. Now you're dealing in a lot of data, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, there's been, there's access to the data, not just of where people are, but about the kinds of searches they're doing and et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. Tell me, how have you dealt with the sort of thorny, prickly issues around data, getting what your customers need, getting what
Sure.
you need, but at the same time protecting the privacy of people?
I think the entire reason why we're open sourcing our contact tracing stack, at least the data tracking part of it, is so that I don't have to touch this issue. Here's my code. You can read it. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. You can host it yourself. We're really trying here. But I think for the rest of our business, we've largely tried to avoid the game as well. Like I think it's a game that people are playing because it makes money. And I don't hate the players. We just choose not to play this game, right? MappedIn is, I always say, we're more like Microsoft. We just make software, right? If you use Microsoft Office and host in OneDrive, it's your data. You're paying me for these tools. That's what MappedIn does. So we host all of our customers' data. We've never had a data incident in the entire 10 years that we've been running. And it says in really big font, this is yours, right? And because I think that there's enough value just in us selling the data. It's for that reason that I'm pretty happy using my iPhone. Their claim is you pay us probably more than the iPhone's worth. We all know that in terms of raw materials, but that upside lets them, there's no incentive for them to go sell our information. I think that I buy that, right? And I sell that. That's what we do at MappedIn.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, of course, at some point in time, there's not going to be a pandemic.
Yes.
What do you see coming out of this? Do you think that, do you think proximity is going to change forever? Our workplaces are going to change forever?
Yeah.
Do you think indoor spaces? I mean, you're an expert in indoor spaces.
Sure.
Tell me about what you think is going to happen coming out of this.
So,
And we're recording this, so we're going to come back and look at it in a couple of years.
You're right. So I'll be careful then. I'm talking to my customers as much as I can, right? We've always had 3-month town halls with, some of the world's largest publicly traded real estate holding corporations. So we have a good index of what they're thinking. And the retail folks think that this will be cyclical because if you look at Asia, the malls are packed, right? People went out and just spent all the money they had saved. Savings are through the roof everywhere, consumer saving, because we're just scared. Everyone's worried, right? But, e-commerce is going to have a permanent uptick, but retail is coming back either way. So the retail folks that we work with, which tend to be the Class A operators, they call themselves fortress malls. They're the ones you want to go to, not because you need item X, but because you wanted to spend Saturday with the family, right? So that's always going to be there, and we're seeing them continue to invest. I think there's going to be much, much more disruption happening on the commercial real estate side, offices, right? I will never need the space per employee that I currently pay for at MappedIn. They don't want it, right? We did a survey, and 1/3 of our team wants to work from home forever. 1/3 says they want to come in for a day a week, and 1/3 says they really miss the office. And I joked to them, like, this is the hardest outcome on the survey. I wish you guys were more clear about this, right? It would be easier to solve, because right now we got to pay for both. But what I'm sure you're hearing more than I am, but all my friends and myself, we're thinking, well, okay, well, let's downsize, right? Let's get some common areas. Hoteling is going to be the norm. Let's have a great kitchen.
It's actually why we just re-upped our lease here for another 5 years, as we said, and the big conversation with the board of directors was, we really think that the workplace is going to change.
Yes.
We're not entirely sure how, but we absolutely believe that this kind of contingency-based space is going to be in demand.
I think so. If my lease was shorter, I'd just ask you for some space here, deal our stuff here. I think we're going to be working from home for a while, and everyone seems to be fine with it. The biggest question, and I keep reminding our team, it's like, look, I still think we're in the honeymoon of work from home, right? Like, everyone's loving the fact that they don't have to put on pants to go to work. Great, I like it too, right? But what happens when we double our team and half the team feel like strangers, right? Because right now, most of our team, like, we're a unit. I think this ordeal has made us stronger. It's built trust. We've doubled, if not more than doubled, our internal communications efforts. I like all the stuff we've done. I think it's made us stronger. But if we try to grow another 50 people this way, I'm figuring that out. Like, I got my entire, every week our management team gets together and talks about basically anything you want. What are some problems? This is literally the only one on the horizon, is how do we create the same kind of culture and build the same kind of teams that we've built.
And it's exactly what we're focusing on right now with our Future of Work and Learning collaborative. Is, what does workplace mean? How do you build high performance teams when we don't have proximity? How do you build culture in organizations? How do you orient people? But I think that it is going to be a net positive for us, because it's going to open up an opportunity for us to access talent we couldn't get before. I mean, the biggest constraint that we had in Waterloo region with tech companies was we couldn't hire the people that we needed fast enough. Now, if proximity is optional, and we can hire people anywhere, and of course, we're launching Communitech outposts in over 100 locations around the world shortly.
100, really?
So people won't have to move. You can just hire them risk-free in any jurisdiction. So I really do think that that's going to help us as an organization, and I think it's also going to help people who find their own work style. I mean, one of the people on my team says, he's a real introvert, and he says, I've been training my whole life to do this. I'm loving it. I'm never going back. And I think a lot of the developers are like that as well.
That was the joke I was saying to everybody.
But a lot of people are really struggling. They're really struggling because this is in many respects is people's life. These are our friends that we work with, and
in a big way. Like I spend more time with my coworkers than anybody else besides my spouse, right? So. But I think in an even broader sense, like the tech community has always been very lucky in that we're the growth category in the world. Wages are great. Everyone's going to be fine, right? But I think that the social fabric underlying general employment and employment contracts is changing. We already saw that with gig economy workers. And how does a government provide services when those people don't pay into those services the same way, right? Well, I think we're going to see more of that now. Upwork is going to have a killing as a result of COVID. Right, because to your point, we can hire anywhere now, and I don't know. I think that's way above my pay grade, but I think that's coming. Before it was just taxi drivers and food delivery people, and now it's going to be anyone who can work at a desk. Yep,
well, I hear you now. I guess I think the audience is really going to want to know about this next question. But is there an update on the cat?
On the cat. The cat's fine, although he's been savaged by my fiance's cat, who, so this is a story. So I moved, I got engaged 2 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then as part of that, I had to help move her cat from New York to Canada. So I took the flight, did it, quarantined for 2 weeks. This is a Soviet Kazakhstan cat.
There's such a thing.
There's such a thing. Well, it's a street cat from Soviet Kazakhstan.
Wow.
Who's like 13 plus, because we don't really know how old he is. He's this big. He has a bullet in him from the first time they took him to the vet. It's like, there's a bullet in this cat, but he seems to be fine. Anyway, he's half the size, geriatric, beat the crap out of my cat, who's like the largest cat anyone's ever seen.
It's a remarkable cat.
In the prime of his life. And he's got a puncture wound in his back. He's absolutely terrified. So I've been saying it's like the 70-year-old MMA fighter versus like the fat kid from school, and the fat kid got his ass whooped.
Well, that's a great update.
Yeah.
Listen, Hongwei, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank you very much for joining us here today. It's great to have an opportunity to catch up.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thanks for what Communitech's doing. I think we need it now more than ever.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you all very much for joining us here today for TrueNorthTV. And we're going to be back with another episode on Tuesday at noon next week. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for watching this episode of TrueNorthTV. Missed an episode? Watch them on demand at TrueNorthWaterloo.com or on Communitech's YouTube channel.